first case that you looked into that got you thinking something weird's going on?
Probably would have been at Yosemite, and there was a girl named Stacy Harris, and she, just weirdly, she grew up like 5 miles from me. I grew up in a little city, Cupertino, California. She grew up in Saratoga, the next town over. She went with her dad on a trip by horse, sponsored by a contractor in the park at Yosemite, and they were going to ride into this place called the High Sierra Camp. Her and her dad and 5 other people. And they get escorted in by a cowboy contractor, and they come to these cabins. And her dad's an older guy. They get to the cabin, and she says, "Hey, Dad, I want to go over here to the point. I want to take some pictures." She brings her camera. And one of the guys, a 72-year-old guy, is sitting at that point, and she goes, "I'm going to go right there and sit with him and take some pictures." He goes, "Sure." Dad watches her walk out. They sits down. Old guy, barely could ride the horse. She's taking pictures. She gets up, and down at the bottom of the hill, there's a small lake. And surrounding the lake, there's trees. She walks down into the trees, presumably to take pictures of the lake, but she doesn't come back. Big search. I'm talking about one of the biggest searches in Yosemite history. And they find the lens cap to her camera inside that path in the tree line. They never find her. And that happened 46 years ago. I filed the Freedom of Information Act for that report and all the investigation into it, and I get denied. I appealed. I got denied. Finally, a special agent from the Park Service, just so people know, the Park Service has uniformed police officers, National Park Service police, that patrol their parks. And they go to the National Law Enforcement Academy. Up above them, they have special agents, detectives, and they are doing all the follow-up work that the police officers in the field do. This case goes to a special agent. There's been nothing done on this case in 40 years. The special agent calls me. "Why do you want the case?" I said, "Well, that's an irrelevant question according to FOIA. You can't ask that." And he goes, "Well, I want to know." I said, "Well, it's been 47 years. I doubt anyone's looked at it. Have you looked at it?" "No, nobody's looked at it." I said, "Well, I'd like a copy of it just to understand what happened." He goes, "You're never going to get the case." This guy's name was Special Agent Yu. Why you? I said, "Why?" And he says, "None of your business. You're never going to get it." I said, "First of all, why talk to me like that? I'm prior law enforcement. I'm not being rude. I just want to know." He goes, "Forget it. Drop it. You're never going to see it." I said, "No, I want that case." And he goes, "You've never seen any other missing person case, and you're not going to see this one." I said, "Whoa, I have over 30 missing person cases from your agency from around the United States that I've FOIA'd before and I've received. You're a liar. You said that to me." I said, "No, I'm not a liar. I don't lie. And this is the truth." And he goes, "Well, you're not getting this one. Anything else you want to know?" I said, "No, I think you've done it." And that was it. In that amount of time, I've really found out nothing more about the Stacy Harris case. 14-year-old girl, disappeared, never found. Nobody's ever done anything on the case in 40 years. I still haven't seen it. Now, I talked to Tim Burchett, who you had in here the other day. And I explained to him, I want a meeting with Burgum. And I want to lay out what I have and explain the obstruction.
Who's Burgum?
The head of the Department of the Interior,
Okay.
Doug Burgum.
Okay.
And explain to him the obstructions that are happening in his agency. Those are our reports. If nobody's looked at it in 40 plus years, what does it matter if I have it?
Right. The people that were working back then aren't working anymore. It's not like anyone's going to get in trouble.
No, half of them are dead.
Right.
And Tim said, "Okay, I'll have my people get a hold of you." They got a hold of me. They said that they called DOI. They said that DOI people said, "Yeah, we'll get a hold of you." I called them 3 times. They won't call me back.
So what do you think's going on?
So when you look at the totality of, and let's just talk about Yosemite. As I dug into it, there's probably over 50 people missing in Yosemite as we talk right now. When I asked for a list from Yosemite, from the Department of the Interior 12 years ago, they said they don't have a list. I asked for a list of missing people from the entire system in the Department of Interior. They said, we don't have a list. And I said, well, okay, I've written so many books. I'm a printed author. I'm going to ask you to put that list together for me. According to the rules, I fit that criteria to ask.
But they said they don't have a list.
Right. But I asked them to put one together.
Okay.
And they said, we'll get back to you. They said, no, you don't qualify. But if you want us to put together a list from the entire system, it's going to cost you $1.4 million. If you want a list from Yosemite, that's going to cost you $34,000. So that got me really upset. Over the next 2 years, I put the list together. Joe, the 3rd year, you know what Yosemite did? They released a list of missing people from Yosemite. So I know I got all the people from Yosemite. I wrote about them in my books. They still haven't released a list from the entire system.
So do you think they released it because you were pressuring them? No, so like you could look at it a bunch of different ways. I'm trying to like look at it from the skeptic's perspective. You'd say, well, this is clear. A bunch of people don't want to do their job. They're lazy. They don't like this guy coming along and asking for information. But you think there's something weird going on.
So
a FOIA I found on their website that was sent to him in 2011. It says that the appeal was properly invoked because of exemptions 7A. And I'll let you read that, what that is.
7A permits the withholding of records or information compiled for law enforcement purposes, but only to the extent that the production of such law enforcement records or information could reasonably be expected to interfere with enforcement proceedings. So they could withhold it because you could interfere with enforcement proceedings?
40 years later. Or 30 years later, I guess.
That's fucking weird. The exemption is intended to prevent premature disclosure of the investigatory materials that might be used in law enforcement action. 40 years later?
Yeah, it says the incident is still on. In criminal investigations, the incident is still ongoing.
40 years later? What? Okay. Tinfoil hat firmly placed on your head. What do you think's going on?
So first of all, missing people investigations are not criminal investigations.
Right.
There's nothing criminal about disappearing. If it's a criminal investigation and there's criminal aspects to it, it shouldn't be a missing person case. It ought to be suspicious circumstances investigated by a criminal investigator.
Right.
It has a classification as a missing person. And what they're not saying there is, what about the other 40 cases I've already gotten from them that are since that are missing person cases?
Right. So that's a little weird, but I could also see incompetent people that don't want to work. They don't want to do their job, and they're like, fuck this guy. I don't want to do his work. I don't want to go. Why is he asking me for this information? He's just a kooky author. I could see that. But like, what do you think might be going on with these people?
So when I was in law enforcement, I worked on the SWAT team, and we had canines assigned to our team. Joe, I can't ever remember us looking for someone with a dog and the dog didn't find the person.
Right.
I have 1,200 to 1,500 cases where they bring a canine to find a missing person and the dog can't track, won't track, or turns around, comes down and sits down and is not interested in tracking. That's totally outside the behavior of a dog.
Isn't that what happened to that woman recently that went missing? That was a part of this whole group of scientists that were involved in propulsion research.
Riza?
Yeah. Same sort of situation, right? She was with her friend. They were hiking. They had just talked. The friend was ahead of her. And the friend turned around to ask her a question. She was gone. They do an investigation. They bring in dogs. Can't find anything. The lady's just gone.
100%. You're 100% right. It doesn't make any sense, and it fit that 411 criteria that I laid down, which is why I did a video about it. Her disappearance doesn't make sense.
So do you have suspicions? Like, do you think something supernatural is going on? Do you think something extraterrestrial or interdimensional? Like, what do you think is involved in these people going missing?
First of all, I don't know.
Right.
In my books, I've laid out facts, and I let the viewer decide. But one thing I did find, because I've written about a lot of hunters that have disappeared. And let's say you and I go out and we're going to go pig hunting at your friend's farm down the way. And you say, hey, Dave, you go that way, and I'll go that way, and I'll meet you in an hour. Okay. So in my world, I call that point of separation. Every time on a missing hunter case, it's at that point of separation that something happens. It never happens when they're together. It always happens when people are alone. That's point number one. Number two is the canine issue. Canines' failure to pick up a scent. They bring in